Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Yeah. All right. You long? Stretch it. Hello and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your mad as hell and not taking it anymore host, Howard Fletcher. I'm joined as always by my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug, and we are positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. We are psyched. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very, very warm welcome. Thank you for giving us a try. We appreciate it. We know you have a lot to choose from out there. We're glad that you're choosing to spend some time with us today. We aim to please, so stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something that you like. We want you to keep coming back. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how we feel about you. You are truly the reason that I am here. You're the reason that Jack is here. You're the reason that we are here. So let's have some fun. We have another jam-packed show for you today. The Elongated Man just got cut off at the knees. A co-creator of Friends says she regrets forgetting that not only white people go to coffee shops. I know nothing of Vanderpump Rules, but I'm still going to talk about it. I'll always bring you breaking news. You know that. And I will recap the latest episode of the STARZ series, Hightown. So, let's start off with some breaking flash news. Hartley Sawyer has been fired from the CW's Flash over a collection of racist and misogynist tweets he posted prior to joining the show. The news was confirmed by the good old CW and the show's producers Warner Brothers Television and Berlanti Productions, who provided the following statement. Quote, Mr. Hartley Sawyer will not be returning for season 7 of The Flash. In regards to Mr. Sawyer's posts on social media, we do not tolerate derogatory remarks that target any race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, or sexual orientation. Such remarks are antithetical to our values and policies, which strive and evolve to promote a safe, inclusive, and productive environment for our workforce, end quote. The tweets in question date mainly from 2012 to 2014, including this one. Quote, the only thing keeping me from doing mildly racist tweets is the knowledge that Al Sharpton would never stop complaining about me, end quote. That's one of the lighter ones. That's probably the lightest one. He had some pretty, and they weren't cool ones that they had a whole list of them. I'm not going to read them. Hartley issued an apology via his Instagram last week saying that he is, quote, incredibly sorry, ashamed, and disappointed in myself for my ignorance back then, end quote. Who the hell is Hartley Sawyer, you ask? Well, Sawyer joined The Flash in season 4 as Ralph Dibny, a.k.a. the Elongated Man, for those of you who read DC Comics. He's been a series regular for the past 2 seasons. Season 6 finished airing just over a month ago. The Elongated Man, he kind of stretches like Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. You know, one of those deals. News of his firing comes less than a week after a writer and producer on the upcoming Chris Maloney censored Law & Order spinoff, which we reported last show, Law & Order Organized Crime. He was fired for offensive posts on social media. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, if you were a jerk in the past, you should delete your Twitter account. And you probably shouldn't tweet, or if you tweet, you need to tweet under a different name. But I'm all for forgiveness, but I don't know why people use Twitter in this way. If you want to, if you think you're funny, just don't tell jokes that use people as, that make just tasteless remarks about things that you are not. That's all. So, especially if you're in the media, just don't do it. Okay, that's enough advice from me for this segment. And here is some more breaking news that moviegoers might like. Movie theaters in California could begin reopening as soon as June 12th, under strict proposed guidelines that have been issued by the state's Department of Health. Governor Gavin Newsom has yet to weigh in on the proposed guidelines, which are part of family entertainment rules. The rules for movie theaters would include requiring face coverings to be worn when entering and exiting theaters. You don't have to wear them when you're in there. You got to eat your popcorn, When obtaining refreshments at the concession stand, you got to have a mask. And whenever physical distancing cannot be maintained, you have to wear a mask. These guidelines issued Monday will also limit the number of attendees to 25% of theater capacity, or a maximum of 100 attendees, whichever is lower. Implementing a reservation system to limit the number of attendees entering the theater at a time whenever possible, turning off public drinking fountains and placing signs informing attendees that they are inoperable, and reconfiguring the seats to ensure physical distancing of at least 6 feet between attendees. Quote, this may require seating every other row or blocking off or removing seats in a checkerboard style. Use each row, but make sure no one is directly behind other patrons, so that distances are maintained in all directions, the department said. Members of the same household may be seated together, but should maintain at least 6 feet of distance from other households, the news rules read. The guidelines also said that county health officers should have approval following their reviews of local epidemiological data, including cases per 100,000 people, rate of test positivity, and local preparedness to support a health care surge, vulnerable populations, contact tracing, and testing. That's a lot. Movie theaters have been closed nationwide since mid-March because of the coronavirus pandemic. There were 554 locations open nationwide last weekend, including 243 drive-ins. So, I don't know if there are any movie theaters open in your location. If there are, and you went, I'd like to hear about what it was like. If you please email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. I'd love to talk about it. Why did I bring this up? Because it's really a movie story rather than a television story. Because I always want to be right. And I just want to put forward that I think streaming of movies that were meant to go to theaters or that would have gone to theaters before the pandemic, let me put it that way, will probably be the norm going forward, unless you're talking about huge blockbuster, Fast and Furious, Star Wars, Jurassic Park type flicks. They're going to be streamed. I think most horror movies are going to be streamed. A lot of rom-coms are going to be streamed. So, because this is saying, and this may not change anytime soon, within the next maybe 2 years, that, theaters will be full to capacity. They may not. They probably won't without a vaccine. And so, I think budgets for films are going to go down because, you have to make your money back if it's a business. And if you're not going to be able to charge people what they've been charging, which is like about $15 a ticket and filling theaters, then you're going to have to go the streaming route. And the streaming route, while it still can be profitable, they're going to have to make the films in a way that will make streaming profitable. So I think you're going to have a big gap between movies. They're going to be either the very economically made, high quality, good acting movies, but they're meant for streaming, or you're going to have the big budget, hundreds of millions or, $100 million, $200 million budget movies that are going to be meant for the theaters. And they're going to have a longer run because you're not going to be able to show as many people at a time in the theater, or you're going to have to put it on a whole bunch of screens. the multiplex might have one movie at every screen. Who knows? Anyway, that's it for our first segment. Next, I'm going to talk about Friends. Yeah, I feel another rant coming on, but this is the good news. One of the co-creators feels as though she could have done a better job. I'll be right back. Go get some food. Go get a drink. Talk to you soon.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
All right, let's talk about Friends once again. We're back, and I'm going to talk about Friends once again. I've talked about Friends before on this podcast. Now, for those of you who are listening the first time, I will say what I've said many times. I usually say it at least once a show. If I haven't watched a show, I would never tell somebody not to watch it. And I did not watch Friends. However, I have seen bits and pieces of Friends. It's kind of impossible unless you've had your head buried in the sand not to have seen something of the show. I was never a fan of it because, well, first off, let me say I didn't watch it because a lot of people whose tastes I could tell were not the same as mine really loved the show. And none of the people who are what I call my television soulmates really said that I needed to watch Friends, so I never got into it. And then when I happened to see the cast and some clips or commercials of the show or whatever, and I heard it took place in New York, I was like, this is not New York. It's just, I didn't see anybody on the show but these people that all look the same. And New York is probably about the most diverse place in the world that you can go, other than maybe Tokyo or something. And still, I mean, now I shouldn't even use that as an example. New York is one of our great big cities, the quintessential melting pot. And I just did not think Friends was representative of it. And I understand it's a comedy and you shouldn't be coming at it looking with such serious eyes, but I just couldn't take it seriously. So here is an article that came to my good old email box. This one happens to come from, well, I got it from two places. I got it from Variety and from Entertainment Tonight. And I'm just going to read it, the parts that I called from it. Want to hear it? Here it go. Few sitcoms have experienced as much enduring success as Friends. But one of the show's co-creators has regrets about representation in the series. In a conversation during ATX TV's virtual festival, Marta Kaufman addressed the lack of diversity in Friends, which has an all-white main cast. During a live stream panel June 7th, Kaufman became emotional when asked what she wished she had known starting out in her career, according to Entertainment Tonight. Quote, "I wish I knew then what I knew today," she said, tearing up. "Sorry, I just wish I knew then what I know now. I would have made very different decisions." Quote, "I mean, we've always encouraged people of diversity in our company, but I didn't do enough," she continued. "And now all I can think about is, what can I do? What can I do differently? How can I run my show a new way? And that's something I not only wish I knew when I started show running, but I wish I knew all the way up through last year," end quote. Kaufman created Friends, which ran from 1994 to 2004 with David Crane. And she was most recently overseeing Netflix's Grace and Frankie. Her NBC sitcom was a massive hit, but it has been criticized in recent years for its lack of diversity in casting. Okay, let me stop there. It wasn't criticized in recent years. It was criticized when it was on the air, but it was criticized by voices that really no one paid attention to back then. Now we have people marching in the streets about things that people have been saying my entire life. So let's just clear that one up. All right. The article continues. Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe on Friends, reflected on the show's all-white cast in an interview with the Sunday Times last month. Kudrow imagined how it would look if the series was created today. It'd be completely different. It would not be an all-white cast for sure, she said. I'm not sure what else, but to me, it should be looked at as a time capsule, not for what they did wrong. End quote. Okay. Her co-star, David Schwimmer, who played Ross Geller on the show, has also spoken up about the show's politics, calling it, quote, groundbreaking in its time, end quote. During an interview with The Guardian last year, quote, but I was well aware of the lack of diversity, and I campaigned for years to have Ross date women of color, he continued. One of the first girlfriends I had on the show was an Asian American woman, and later I dated African American women. That was a very conscious push on my part, end quote. He continued, maybe there should be an all-black Friends or an all-Asian Friends, he added. Okay. There have been all-black quote-unquote Friends shows, but again, they weren't watched by crossover audiences. You know, there was a show called Living Single that was on Fox, of all places, ironically, but it was on the Fox network. And it was about 4 women, black women, who lived together in an apartment. And it was much, I guess, I don't watch Friends, like I said, but I guess it was much a format like Friends. They were young, working people in, I think it was New York. You know, I don't remember what city they were supposed to be in. As far as all Asian, I do think there's a lack of Asian representation. And they're getting, you know, that's starting to change now just in the last 5 years or so. Let me get back to, let me finish this and then I'll get to my point. The last paragraph. There are no current plans for a Friends reboot, but the cast is planning on reuniting for a special on HBO Max, the new exclusive streaming home of the series, later this year. I've talked about that before. They were going to have a live get together with all of the cast members on the old set. I thought it was going to be an interview, but the more I read about it, I think it was going to be like a reunion of the cast in character. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but that's what HBO Max was kind of pushing as a reason to join, because you would have access to this live event, and you still will whenever it happens. Well, let me get back to this whole thing about the diversity issue, because I think it's great now that we're having this conversation. Don't get me wrong about that. I think it's a fantastic thing. It's way overdue, but let's hope that it's a serious conversation from now on. I just think it's very interesting when I read these articles from these people who now, and I hope they're just not just lip service, I hope now they were really having a change of heart about how they want to approach media and television and do things differently, as they say. They make it seem as though none of these things were being said, and that all of a sudden it's being brought to their attention in 2020. And either they were willingly ignorant, which is quite possible. It's quite possible in this society to put yourself in a bubble and not hear these things. But to say that nobody was talking about this, or if she had known then what she knows now, well, she just wasn't listening. That's all I have to say about that. And that's part of the frustration that you see now in the street, is that it's one thing to not know because it was impossible to know. That's, you know, if, and that's how I feel as many of you listeners know, as a black person. Listen, if you grew up in a town that was all one ethnic group, let's just call it an all white town in the Midwest, and you never had access or exposure to people that were different than you are, then I can understand you might not know much about other cultures. I get that. But if you're a showrunner in LA or in New York, or in LA, right, running a show about New York, and you're telling me you didn't hear anything about the lack of diversity on your show, then you're lying, in my opinion. Or you just didn't want to know. And if you didn't want to know, it's almost as bad as lying. So, but that said, Friends was an overwhelming success. All those cast members became extremely generationally wealthy on that show. It was that successful. So, you know, that's another thing too. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Friends was a 10-year success. That was a 10-year success, and because of what it was. And so, if it had been Friends with a different cast, might not have been as successful. So you got to take the good with the bad. I'm just glad to hear that maybe things will change for the better, in my view, in the future. Next, we're going to be talking about the Vanderpump Rules. If you know anything about Vanderpump Rules, please email me or tweet me at FletchDC or at podcasthour@gmail.com. I do not know, but I'm going to read this article anyway, or I'm going to talk about this article about another issue that came up this week in this time of racial strife with the Vanderpump Rules. I'll be back. Go get a stiff drink. We got to pay some bills.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right. Yeah, up there. All you Friends fans, don't be mad at me. Okay? I know Friends was as David Schwimmer said, groundbreaking show, very good show. Just, I get a little riled up about it. Let's talk about the Vanderpump Rules. But let me say this. A few weeks back, for about a month to since the middle of March, it seemed like every show, I'm talking about the way COVID has affected the media, the television industry. That's all we talked about is COVID. Something was shutting down. Something was being changed, all because of COVID. Well, guess what? This week, all the stories are about race. They have something to do with something that happened that, has to do with race. And unfortunately, it's because of what we're going through now. Here's another story. Please bear with me. Vanderpump Rules star Stassi Schroeder has been dropped by her agency and publicist after it was revealed that she called the police on former co-star Faith Stowers for a crime Stowers had nothing to do with. Variety has learned exclusively. Now, this was everywhere, but Variety heard about it first, I guess. Stowers, who was black, appeared on the 4th and 6th season of Vanderpump Rules, which features a nearly all-white cast. Wasn't that paragraph in our last story? Anyway, a spokesperson for UTA tells Variety that Schroeder is no longer a client of the agency. Schroeder, who's been with the same publicist since the beginning of her media career, who was integral in strategically taking her brand from reality TV personality to beyond, and she has been repped by Metro Public Relations since the mid-2018s. The PR firm confirmed to Variety on Monday it has cut ties with Schroeder, stating, quote, she became a client when her publicist joined our company in July 2018. We made the decision this week to part ways with Stassi. Vanderpump Rules, which is a spin-off of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills that focuses on the staff at Lisa Vanderpump's restaurant in West Hollywood. It premiered in 2013 and has been on for 8 seasons. Damn. Schroeder was part of the original cast and has parlayed her reality star fame into a multi-platform career, including a touring show, her own podcast, New York Times best-selling book, and numerous endorsement deals, capitalizing off her 2 million Instagram followers. In the aftermath of her actions resurfacing, Schroeder has lost deals with shaving brand Billy, vitamin brand Ritual, and Secret Deodorant, which have all confirmed they've cut ties with Schroeder via statements to the press. and Bravo has declined to comment on the matter. I bet you Bravo is trying to figure out how they can make another reality show based on this scandal. So that's why they're not saying anything. Stowers spoke last week during an Instagram live chat about the time when Schroeder and fellow Vanderpump star Kristen Doubt called the police to pin crimes on her that were reported in a tabloid article about a black woman wanted for theft. The woman pictured in the tabloid article was not Stowers. Quote, there was this article on Daily Mail where there was an African-American lady, Stowers recalled during an Instagram live chat on June 2nd. It was a weird photo, so she looked very light-skinned and had these different weird tattoos. They showcased her, and I guess this woman was robbing people. And they called the cops and said it was me. This is like a true story. It's like a true story. I heard this from actually Stassi during an interview. Schroeder has spoken about the incident in the past and confirmed calling the cops during a 2018 appearance on the Bitch Bible podcast. These people's lives. Doubt, who is also part of the original Vanderpump Rules cast, tweeted a link to the article at the time about the woman involved in the alleged crime, posting, "Hey, Tweeties, doesn't this ex-Pumps Rules thief look familiar? Someone put her on TV, on MTV, and gave her a platform for press. I didn't want to go there, but I'm going there." All right. Last week, Doubt released a book, He's Making You Crazy, How to Get the Guy, Get Even, and Get Over It, published by Chicago Review Press. She originally had a book tour scheduled, but prior to this controversy, all in-person dates were canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. Doubt has not been dropped by any sponsors, Variety learned. An insider close to the reality star and author says she has reached out directly to Stowers to apologize. A rep for Doubt declined to comment when contacted by Variety. Both Schroeder and Doubt have also released apology statements on their social media. Quote, racially insensitive comments from my past have resurfaced, Schroeder posted. My emotions over something that happened between our friends outweighed my logic, and there's no excuse for that. I did not recognize then the serious ramifications that could have transpired because of my actions. What I did to Faith was wrong. I apologize, and I do not expect forgiveness. Doubt posted, I have been taking some time to really process what I've been seeing, feeling, and learning. And I need to address something specifically that happened a few years ago with my former classmate, Faith Stowers. Although my actions were not racially driven, I am now completely aware of how my privilege blinded me from the reality of law enforcement's treatment of the black community and how dangerous my actions would have been to her. It was never my intention to add to the injustice and imbalance. I'm ashamed, embarrassed, and incredibly sorry. I will do better. I have to do better. End quote. This is not the first time Schroeder has been embroiled in a public controversy dealing with social justice issues that caused brands to cut ties with her. In 2017, after making insensitive comments about the hashtag MeToo movement, Rent the Runway was among the companies that dropped out as advertisers from Schroeder's podcast. All right. Anyway, this was in the trades. It came in as an email. I don't watch the show. I have no idea who these people are. So hopefully they have it worked out. I am glad that they are trying to make amends for what they did. And maybe everyone will learn from this. I just find it amazing. To me, it's unbelievable, but understandable because I know the power of media. Is that these people have such importance that they get signed to be to endorsement deals, and they are considered influencers because they do influence people, because they were on this reality show, this Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Don't watch Vanderpump Rules, not familiar with the restaurant that they own, never been to the restaurant they own, might have fantastic food. So that's another issue. I'll just call that my ignorance of those folks. But it blows me that people don't realize that when you call the police on people for, just on a whim, on a prank, or with bad intentions. That's bad enough. But you should know. And I think you do. You just won't do. They do. They just don't want to admit it to themselves. When you do that to people who are, to black people, or you do it to people who are homeless, or you do it to people who society kind of looks as people who have a high, they already look askance and hold suspect to be the usual suspects, to be criminals. You're not putting them in a good position. It's not a prank. It's not like if you called the police on good old Mr. Wilson, and they show up and they say, "Oh, those darn kids." No, you call in on a black person, they'll probably be arrested just for questioning. So since I don't know these young ladies, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that this is a story of people changing their lives and giving earnest apologies for what they did. Given what I'm reading about their lifestyles and their Vanderpump roles already sounds entitled. I just tend to believe that they're doing what they need to do in order to maintain their businesses, rather than honestly changing. But what do I know? I don't know them. So if you watch the show, please tell me. I'd like to be wrong about them. They might turn out to be, pillars of society from here on. Who knows? Or they may have the next scandalous show on Bravo, which is the reason why I don't think Bravo commented. And that's it for this segment. Next, we'll be talking about, I'm going to give you a summer TV preview. This was put together by Collider. This is the best shows to put on your watch list that are going to come up this summer. Stay tuned. We'll talk about that in a second. Don't go away.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right. No more militants on this show right now. We're going to do something really light. This is going to be a summer TV preview watch list that was put together by the staff of Collider. Collider is a media website. You should go check it out sometime. They have some pretty good stories on it. And I'm just going to go down the list and give you a little description maybe of some of these shows. And, some of them, the first one I'm going to talk about, it just started. I watched the first episode, actually the first two episodes, and it was pretty good. The first show on the list is Dirty John, the Betty Broderick story. It premiered on Hulu on June 2nd, but you can also see it on USA, home of Mr. Robot. The show Christian Slater's on. Christian Slater is in the cast of Dirty John, along with Amanda Peet and Rachel Keller and Missy Pyle. It's about the infamous 1989 murders committed by a well-to-do housewife driven to desperation after her divorce. It's pretty good, actually. Like I said, I turned it on. It was interesting. Amanda Peet is really good. I've seen her before. I recognize her, but I couldn't tell you what I saw her in before. But she's really good in this series. So good for you, Amanda Peet. The next show is Dear ... And that comes on Apple TV. The cast is Oprah Winfrey, Gloria Steinem, Spike Lee, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Stevie Wonder, Ali Raisman, and Misty Copeland, and Big Bird. Yes, that Big Bird. Dear sounds like it will be a tearjerker in a good way. But this documentary series profiles an eclectic assortment of heroes from the perspective of the people whose lives they changed. So, that should be pretty good. I like the list of people that they're going to, be profiling. Here's the next one. I May Destroy You. It's going to premiere on June 7th. They've all started, these that I'm just mentioning, but they're on HBO. This one's on HBO. The cast is Michelle Cole, who I've never heard of before. I haven't heard of any of these actors, nor can I pronounce their name. But this is a new HBO series. The series sees the chewing gum creator wearing numerous hats. Creator, executive producer, writer, and most prominently star. I May Destroy You follows Arabella, a millennial writer who rose to prominence on Twitter and is now gearing up to write a new book. Life changes in an instant for Arabella. After a night out drinking and hanging with friends leads to a morning of hazy, violent memories which crystallize into the young writer coming to grips with the fact that she was raped. Wow. And this is a 12-episode miniseries, so that sounds pretty intense. It's probably going to be quite good because HBO makes very good dramas. The next one is F is for Family. This is premieres on June 12th. That'll be the same day that this podcast drops. It's on Netflix. Created by Bill Burr, the comedian. Cast is Bill Burr, Laura Dern, Justin Long, Sam Rockwell, Haley Reinhart. Wow, excellent cast. Jonathan Banks. It feels like ages since we last checked in with the Murphy Clan. Now, this is season 4. Okay, so again, obviously a show that I haven't watched before, but it's been on 4 seasons. This season 3 premiered on November 2018, so that's been a year and a half since this has been on. Let's see, Frank, Sue, Kevin, Bill, and Maureen have some changes in for them. I know nothing about this show other than the stars that are in it. But it sounds like it's good. I'm sure it's a comedy and Bill Burr is connected to it. So if you like Bill Burr, check it out. Crossing Swords. That premieres the same day, June 12th on Hulu. It's a animated series. The fellows from Robot Chicken are bringing their signature stop motion weirdness to Hulu for this wild take on medieval times, focusing on a peasant whose big chance to work in the castle ends up going horribly wrong. Okay. Season 2 of The Politician with Ben Platt. It drops on June 19th on Netflix. It's a Ryan Murphy series. It was good. Season 1 was good. It was a different type of series. I'll put it that way. And I thought all the way through. I kind of wondered if they were going to come back with a second season, but they are. So that's good. Judith Light is in it. Always like to see Judith Light. So if you like season 1, get ready for season 2 of The Politician. It's coming back. Nosferatu. NOS, the number 4, A2, season 2 on AMC. Stars Zachary Quinto as, well, what's the guy's name? Banks, but he's a vampire. I watched the first episode of season 1. I didn't get back to it, not because it was bad. It's just, don't have time to watch everything. This little blurb here, it says it's based on the Joe Hill novel of the same name. It's a dark, twisty, and well-realized adaptation of a very original story. It seemed pretty good, and I probably will go back to it, but I just did not have time to watch the whole thing because you don't have time to watch everything. This next one is something that I'm looking forward to, and I will definitely be watching. Perry Mason. On June 21st on HBO. Now, it has Matthew Rhys from The Americans, John Lithgow, Shea Wiggum. I think this is going to be a really good one. Here's a surefire way. This is the blurb that they gave, so I'll just read it. Here's a surefire way to get me interested in a new TV show. 1, promise that it will tweak and deepen a common TV genre, like, say, the legal procedural, in interesting ways. And 2, stack it with an absolute powerhouse cast, which this one has. Put it on a network interested in experimental quality storytelling above all else, like HBO, and put all these things in the upcoming Perry Mason miniseries revival, and I'm there. And I would agree with this guy who wrote that. I was a fan, I am a fan, of the Perry Mason character. I always liked Perry Mason. I liked Raymond Burr. I liked the whole thing. Now, this one looks very different. This looks very noir type gumshoe situation. So I will be interested to see how they take the Perry Mason of Raymond Burr, who is a very buttoned down type of guy, and make him this kind of hard-boiled gumshoe type of attorney that the Perry Mason of Matthew Reeves looks like it's going to be. So I'm looking forward to that series very much. Season 3 of Yellowstone. It drops on June 21st on the Paramount Network. Now, this is the Taylor Sheridan series that stars Kevin Costner. This is a series that I did watch the first 2, and I liked it a lot. I didn't expect to like it. That's why I know, well, to me, that's why I know it's good. It, if you said there's going to be a Western series with Kevin Costner, I would have thought that it would be kind of cheesy or not good. Kevin Costner hasn't picked the best projects in the back end of his career. This one is good. It's worth it for the cinematography alone. However, it does have a very good script. Taylor Sheridan, I loved Hell or High Water, that movie. And he writes the whole deal here. So it's really good. So Yellowstone, watch it. And last but not least, Season 2 of The Twilight Zone comes on CBS All Access, created by, Jordan Peele. Of course, it's a reconstitution of the Rod Serling Twilight Zone. I don't have CBS All Access, so I've only seen the episodes of the Twilight Zone or Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone that have made their way by hook or by crook onto YouTube. So that's been like 3 episodes. They were all good. Much better than Creepshow. Okay. To compare them doesn't do justice to Twilight Zone at all. So I'm looking forward to this next, to hopefully being able to see season 1 and maybe season 2. I'm not planning on getting CBS All Access anytime soon, but maybe somebody will bootleg it and put it on the series, that is, and put it on YouTube so cheapskates like myself can watch. And that's it. If you heard something on that list that you want to see this summer, watch it, email me, let's talk about it. And I look forward to having that conversation with you. Next, we got some breaking news coming on the wire again. I haven't read it all. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with race. I promise I will not rant about it. And then after that, I'll do a recap of the latest episode of STARZ new series, Hightown. I'll be right back. Don't go away.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
All right. That's right. Been a home stretch, but something just came over, Jack. Something just came over the wire about Vanderpump. We're back on this story already. 1 week after former Vanderpump Rules cast member Faith Stowers revealed that 2 of the show's original cast members, Stassi Schroeder and Kristen Doubt, had reported her to the police for crimes she had nothing to do with, a Bravo spokesperson confirmed that Schroeder and Doubt won't return to the show. Additionally, cast members Max Boyens and Brett Capriani, whose past racist tweets were uncovered after the most recent season premiered in January, also will not return. Damn. On Tuesday, Bravo issued a statement saying Bravo and Evolution Media confirmed today that Stassi Schroeder, Kristen Doubt, Max Boyens, and Brett Capriani will not be returning to Vanderpump Rules. So, just as a follow-up to my earlier story, they cleared house. That the moral of this story is obviously, look, if you're anybody actually, because you never know when your time is going to come to be in the spotlight. Just watch what you tweet, okay? I'm not going to throw stones at you because, everyone says stupid things. Some things are more heinous than others, and I can't look into your heart. But why, to get kicked off of a show just by a stupid thing you tweeted that you thought was clever and was actually hateful is just a dumb move. And calling the cops on anybody when they didn't do anything is dumb too. So don't do those things, all right? Here is some breaking news about a movie that I have always hated. Gone with the Wind is gone. On Tuesday, HBO Max moved the 1939 film from its library in the wake of protests over the death of George Floyd. Quote, Gone with the Wind is a product of its time and depicts some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that have unfortunately been commonplace in American society. These racist depictions were wrong then and they are wrong today. And we feel that to keep up this title without explanation and a denouncement of these depictions would be irresponsible, end quote. An HBO Max spokesperson told Variety. Another quote is that these depictions are certainly counter to Warner Media's values. So when we return the film to HBO Max, it will return with a discussion of its historical context and a denouncement of those very depictions, but will be presented as it was originally created because to do otherwise would be the same as claiming these prejudices never existed. If we are going to create a more just, equitable, and inclusive future, we must first acknowledge and understand our history, end quote. The removal comes after a Los Angeles Times op-ed written by 12 Years a Slave screenwriter John Ridley called for the film to be taken down as it perpetuates racial stereotypes and glorifies the antebellum South. Starring Vivian Leigh, Clark Gable, Hattie McDaniel, and Olivia de Havilland, Gone with the Wind takes place on a plantation outside of Atlanta after the American Civil War. It tells the love story of Scarlett O'Hara, played by Leigh, the daughter of a plantation owner, and Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable, a fellow Southern aristocrat. The film went on to win 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actress for Leigh, Best Director for Victor Fleming, and Best Supporting Actress for McDaniel, who was the first black person to ever win an Oscar. Upon its release, Gone with the Wind broke theater attendance records and was the highest grossing film of all time at that point. It still holds the record when adjusted for inflation. However, despite being considered one of the greatest films of all time, some film commentators have since criticized its depiction of slavery and black people. Okay. It's ironic to me when I read this that it happened to be John Ridley who 12 Years a Slave was an adapted screenplay. John Ridley didn't write it. Wasn't a novel. It was a adaptation of a memoir. And it's funny that he happened to be the person who wrote this op-ed because when I went to see 12 Years a Slave, I went with a very good friend of mine. It wasn't the film soulmate I had mentioned on this podcast before. However, it was another middle-aged, very affluent white woman who's a friend of mine who loves Gone with the Wind. We are both cinephiles. We talk about movies all the time. And I used to tell her, I dislike this movie. I despise it. And she just couldn't believe that somebody who loved movies as much as I do could have such disdain for this movie that some consider to be one of the greatest of all time. And I told her it was because of its unrealistic depiction of the antebellum South. And that slaves just loved doing what they were doing. And there was no such thing as everything was clean and everything was great. So when 12 Years a Slave came out, I made sure, I said, you got to go see this movie with me, because I knew that the director, Steve McQueen, was going to give a very accurate depiction of slavery. And I was familiar with the memoir, and I knew that it was some of the scenes that were going to be in it. So after we went to see it, I walked out and my friend was just ashen. She just was shocked by the whole movie. And I told her, I said, and that is why I do not like Gone with the Wind. And she said, I understand what you're talking about. So why am I talking about this on a TV podcast? This is a very, as I said, we went from the COVID-19 laden shows to now this is a very race laden show. And that's just what's going on in the world. And TV is a big reflection of what's going on in the world most of the time, even if it's what has to do with the politics of television. But anyway, I'm talking about this because as we go forward, if we're going to find, I believe, if our society is truly evolving, that there are certain things that were beloved in the past that were a part of our modern popular culture that are not going to be as revered as they once were, or even taken for granted as they once were. I mean, this is as recent as television shows. When I was younger, and the sitcoms that were rerun, one was McHale's Navy. Well, McHale's Navy was on all the time. You don't see McHale's Navy rerun anymore, if at all, because there were some very derogatory depictions of Japanese during that, in that sitcom that were taken for granted back then. You could, they were terrible depictions. But, and so McHale's Navy pretty much has been banished from television. Tim Conway was on that show. It was and Ernest Borgnine. It was a very funny show in some regard. In other regards, it was terrible. And the same thing with Gone with the Wind. I love Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh is one of my favorite actresses. And, I can't say Clark Gable was a great actor, but I like Clark Gable. But the depictions of the whole antebellum South thing, not only is it antiseptic, but the characterizations, one, Hattie McDaniel one for this mammy type of character, just repugnant. And so, and it romanticizes a part of our history. And this is part of the problem now I think we're seeing in society, is that some people, understandably so, do not understand some of the things that people have gone through in the past, such as Native Americans, Black people, Jews in some regard, and others in this society, because of the way they have been depicted in media and in modern culture, or entertainment culture, has been whitewashed, has been sanitized. So when these groups make complaints against the status quo, saying that things have been hard for them, the thought is, by those who are not in touch with reality as far as history is concerned, is that you just didn't work hard enough, because it didn't look that bad from what I saw on Gone with the Wind. And you seem pretty happy in that Marx Brothers movie I saw. And you must not be working hard enough if you can't find an apartment in New York, because these guys on Friends have a huge apartment or a couple of huge apartments, and they're just average kids. So television and media does have a strong effect on how we look at society and the people in it. And I think it's very responsible for HBO Max to take this down and also put it up in correct context. And I fully support them showing it in its original form, because it is a very important and historic movie. It just needs to be understood for what it was in the times that it was. And oh, by the way, following Floyd's death and nationwide protests against the oppression of black rights and police violence, greater scrutiny has been given to some TV shows, including Live PD and Cops, which we talked about on this show last episode, which was canceled by Paramount Network on Tuesday. So Bad Boys and Live PD are no more. So there you have it. Next, I'm going to recap the latest of STARZ crime drama, Hightown. It's spiraling a bit, folks, but I'll get to that right after this. Don't go away.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, we're back. Well, there's no race in this. It's all just TV, and it's about Hightown. And folks, I did start watching Hightown. For those of you who are regular listeners, I jumped off of Creepshow, because Creepshow was pretty bad. And I jumped on Hightown. Hightown started with a bang, but we'll see. It looks like it might be getting shaky. So anyway, here it is. STARZ latest crime drama Hightown returns this week, and with it another mundane slice of investigative action. It's a problem the entire series has had. In truth, and right now, the show is struggling to maintain its relevance, and as all eyes turn toward Jackie capturing Krista and learning the truth, and it's a truth we already know. There's not many things that are new in this show. Episode 4 of Hightown begins with Jackie driving to the construction yard, but failing to find anything. Instead, she gets a threat from this guy named Anthony. Anthony's the dude who plays, or the actor that plays Solomon Grundy in Gotham. If you watch Gotham, you know what I'm talking about. Which leads her to make a hasty exit. He chases her off. However, on the way back, she gets a call from the chief of the fish police offering her a chance to prove herself and become part of the force again. Contemplating what to do next, she calls Junior and decides against his suggestion of going back into therapy. Junior said, "You're not quite well. You need to go back." Instead, she decides to wait for Anthony to get off work, and she follows his truck. And he sees that he's following her because she's like right behind his truck in the Prius that he just saw her get in when he chased her off. And he bashes out the headlight and makes a couple threats, but she still demands that he tells her where Krista is. And she convinces him by saying that she's going to call her, call his wife, which she kind of does. And after some convincing, she manages to get the address from him. And she's staying at this motel. So she heads to the motel and she talks her way into the room. Jackie is very good apparently, at talking people into things. As you can tell, that's one thing that I have a problem with. But anyway, she starts sifting through Krista's belongings, and she pieces together what part she has to play. But she, in this, how she can somehow talk to Krista. But before she can wait for Krista, she gets a call to head back to work. So before she leaves the Krista's apartment, or motel room that she was let in by the maid that she talked her way into, she leaves a note for Krista with her number saying that in case she wants help, please give me a call. When Krista returns, she phones Anthony because she sees this number and she wants to ask Anthony about it. Anthony tells her, "Never call me again because this chick," talking about Jackie, came looking for you and threatened to talk to my wife. And so I don't want to talk to you anymore. So never call here again. So now Krista feels as though she has nowhere to go. And she is, kind of crushed that this guy who is taking advantage of her anyway, but she has nowhere to go. Ray, the cop, meanwhile, goes to the strip club where Renee continues to seduce him. Renee is the girlfriend of Frankie, the big drug dealer in jail. And he goes to the station after he, talks to Renee at the strip club, and they decide to meet up later on. He goes to the station to talk to Ethan. Now, Ethan is the guy who overdosed when they tried to bust him last week because he was going to hopefully lead them to Osito, who is the other big drug dealer who works for Frankie. And if you're not confused yet, just hang on. You probably will be by the end of this. Okay, so he goes on. That's Ray. Ray convinced Ethan. Ethan is the guy that they busted to wear a wire. Okay, because they busted him on this possession charge. So he said that they wear a wire to go meet Kizzle. Kizzle is the Eminem looking dude. Now, let me make one statement right now. Whoever writes these names up, who's making up these names for this series, I mean, these couldn't be any more, unimaginative. Ray the cop, Frankie the gangster, Kizzle the guy who looks like Eminem. Come on. But anyway, so he, Ethan, which is a good New England name, Ethan decides that he chooses to wear the wire, and he goes to meet Kizzle at the bar. And he goes with the mission to get some information about Osito and Osito's girlfriend. So he keeps talking to Kizzle about Osito and his girlfriend, which he obviously never talks to this guy about. Kizzle gets upset, probably is a little suspicious as to what's going on. They end up getting into a bar fight, and the police come in under the pretense that they were called, but really they overheard this fight happening through the wire, and they arrest Kizzle, as for assaulting Ethan. Ethan wasn't punching back, really. He was really just getting kind of stomped by Kizzle. Ethan is, he can handle himself, so, he intentionally allowed himself to lose, but still, they didn't get what they wanted, and they arrest Kizzle. Okay, on the back end of arresting Kizzle, Alan, that's Ray's partner, he takes offense to Ray's inappropriate manner of dealing with the situation. And, they have this argument because he just thinks Ray is being totally irresponsible, and he's sort of a live wire and freelancing a little bit more than he should as a detective. And so they have this argument, and Ray's like, well, fine, I'm going to go see the stripper. So he leaves, and he goes to visit Renee. And after sleeping together one more time, she tells him that what they have is over. Especially since he knows Osito. So she breaks up with him, apparently, or at least that's what she says. And Renee, during this conversation, though, Renee happens to spill the beans about Osito's girlfriend, and the fact that her father owns this body shop and this mechanic shop. And Ray decides, well, I'm going to go, that's probably where I'm going to be able to find Osito. And he goes to this mechanic shop, and this is very convoluted, as you can tell. And he goes to the mechanic shop, and while he leaves, she calls Frankie, and I think she was calling Frankie to let him know that I can't be sleeping with this guy Ray anymore. But Frankie said, don't talk over the phone, so they haven't decided what they're going to do there. All right. Meanwhile, Jackie, who got that call from the chief, goes on this fishing operation to get these people that are illegally fishing. She comes up with this big plan where they are going to be able to catch them for a bigger crime than what they set out to do. And because of that, the chief decides, even though she shouldn't be on the force again because she has this big drunk driving charge over her head, he decides, I'm going to let you back on the force anyway because I can make that call and you're just such a good cop. And so she's back on the fish cop force. Junior, meanwhile, finds himself in a difficult position because Osito comes and says, do you know anything about this woman, Jackie, who came talking, asking questions about Krista with the guy who looks like the Solomon Grundy guy? And Junior denies knowing Jackie when we know as an audience he and Jackie are really tight. So now he's in a spot because he's already lied to the drug dealer guy he works for that I don't know. This woman you're worried about is my best friend. But I'm not going to tell you about her because it's my best friend and you'll probably do something to her. So the plot is so ridiculous at this point. Long story short, I'm going to close it out. As the episode closes out, Jackie rings Junior and tells him that she's getting closer to Krista. And on the back of this, she heads back to the bar, and while everyone's celebrating this big bust they just had, she decides to take a shot of alcohol, so apparently she might be back on the sauce. And the big question is, why should you care about these characters? I don't. There's such a lackadaisical amount of character work and the depth and lack of depth that it makes it incredibly difficult to warm to any of these players. Even worse, Jackie's just not likable. She's not. And on top of everything, the amount of sex in the series is really off-putting. And I don't mean that I don't like sex, because I do. It's the lack of substance to back it up. It almost seems blasphemous now to compare this series to Westworld or to Game of Thrones. But those shows have a lot of sex in them, and I love those shows. But it has a purpose. This is just gratuitous, and the sex isn't even hot. It's just disgusting. So it's a shame that to say this right now, but unfortunately Hightown is shaping up like it's not going to be one to remember. But it's better than Creepshow still. And that's it for the GSMC Television Podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you all for listening. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Write the show at podcasthoward@gmail.com or tweet me at FletchDC. Listen, it's tough times out there. I want you all to please take care of yourselves, love one another. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic, so please just wash your hands, try to keep distance from people if you possibly can, and wear a mask if wear a mask. Just do that for me, please. I'd like you to please subscribe to the podcast or rate us. Please give us 5 stars. It helps us grow, and that's what we're trying to do here. My name is Howard Fletcher. I'm here with Jack the Black Pug. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.